understanding, maybe you can help me out here, Mark B, is you by being an elite member, that allows you to see all the archived webinars, no matter who the instructors were.
Right.
So
I'll have the link here. I'll put it up here so that people can visit the site if they're not a member of either the Eat Free or the Eat Elite, and they can buy membership or they can buy individual webinar or video of their liking, and they can download that, or they can become a member and get all of them, all the videos that Mark did or anybody did in any of our series. So
cool.
I'll have that. Yep.
All right. All right, so here we go this week, and once again, welcome. And as restoration agriculture practitioners, you and I have a disproportionately large leveraging effect on the whole food, water, carbon dioxide, species extinction nexus. All of these issues that are swirling around in the world today, we as land managers and natural resource managers, we have an amazing leveraging effect in that the small little piece of ground that we're dealing with, we're not just growing food on it, we're not just destroying an ecosystem and planting maize, for example. We're actually recreating ecosystem function, recreating ecosystem form, and we're growing the natural resources of the present and the future, and we're doing it as our farm businesses, as our profitable enterprises. We're actually genuinely creating clean water, clean air, habitat for endangered and threatened species, food for humans and animals, so on, and living a good life in the meantime. I've spent quite a bit of time on this particular graphic in the past couple of webinars, but this really is a sum total of what it is that we're dealing with. Our plants, of course, will assimilate nutrients from the soil. They incorporate them with photosynthetically fixed carbon to form their living biomass, and they eventually return them to the soil in the form of dead leaves, sticks, branches and stems, and then roots, especially the fine roots on trees, are all disposable. They all go and add to the litter layer circled in red here on the surface of the soil. Then the decomposer organisms, of course, they get their energy from the carbon that's from the organic matter. They exude various different chemicals that start to dissolve the bedrock or the parent material, whether it's a gravelly subsoil or the solid rock, and they incorporate the now liquefied minerals into their bodies. And then they excrete them. They also will die themselves, and then they release those nutrients into the soil. That becomes the nutrition for our plants. And whoops, I went backwards. I wasn't supposed to. Water and air. We remember, of course, from a few webinars back that the air itself is full of these little dust particles that are also part of the fertility cycle in our perennial systems. And the more architecture we have exposed to the air and to the rain, the more rain we're able to catch, even if it's just on surfaces. We'll talk a little bit about that later on in another slide. And so then we have to add the animal component. The animals are eating some of this biomass. They're excreting, pooping, and peeing. Of course, their dead bodies are dying. They're importing minerals from other places. Of course, they're exporting if they leave somewhere else and defecate or die somewhere else. And then we're also able to manage and manipulate the ground layer, whatever it is that we're growing on the surface of the soil. So these two things right here, the animals and the plants, are critical components as well to the overall health and fertility of our system. Now, once again, the notion that, oh, it's all about the bugs in your soil, it has everything to do with everything. It's like, well, yeah, that's part of it. Well, no, it's all about the minerals in your soil. It's mineral balance, mineral balance, mineral balance. Other people's like, no, it's all about mulch and surface litter and all that kind of stuff. Other people's like, oh, no, it's all about grazing animals. Oh, it's all about the cover crops. Oh, it's all about irrigation or rainfall. It's all of it together. There is not any one of these things is the be-all, end-all. We live in a complex world and it's kind of ridiculous to think that we can solve complex issues with simple solutions. I'm not saying complicated solutions. They are complex. If we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different variables here that we're playing with, then the architecture of our plant communities themselves. How was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 plus 1 is 7. So there's at least 7 different things. 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 times 7 times 7. That's a whole bunch of different possible combinations. Tweak one and you change the other. You change this, you change that. This is a complex, interactive system. Now, nitrogen is the largest limiting factor for plant growth. That's why it's called a fertilizer. You add nitrogen to the plant, and it'll grow faster. So the biological inputs of nitrogen to our forested ecosystems occurs through soil bacteria and tree roots, free-living bacteria in the plant litter and in the mineral soil, epiphytic lichens on the bark, lichens that are hanging from the tree branches, animals, and the decay of woody debris. That's what this is saying right here. All of this is what adds our fertilizer to our system. And so understanding how this works is critical to us being able to manage perennial ecosystems and produce food, fuels, medicines, fiber, building materials, industrial ingredients, and so on. And to do it in such a way that we don't break the bank, we actually make a little money at it. Just wanted to go through this again, read this in the preview. It's during the decomposition process that this nitrogen is released as ammonium. And all you got to do to learn about ammonium is you go pee in a bucket and put a lid on it for a few days, and after 3-4 days or whatever, it's going to start to stink like crazy. That is what's going on in the soil. Every little microbe is excreting whatever it is that it excretes, and a lot of that is the ammonium, and that's the fertilizer. So it's the life in our soil that is, and above ground, of course, as well, the animals that are above ground, that are excreting the fertilizer for our systems. So the more life we have in our system, the more fertilizer we have available. And the life, of course, is all it's all energized by plant litter and herbivore waste. It's all this net primary productivity above and beyond the metabolic needs of the plant and the woody system itself. And so how do we get that released? It's the decay cycle. It's an essential driver of our system. We're managing the decay cycle as much as we're managing the growth cycle. And here's where the action is, the interaction between our subsoil, our parent material, our broken apart parent material, the fine roots, and the hyperactive organic layer in the soil. This is where all the life is taking place within the soil. And then, of course, all the litter deposition on top, and animals and other plants above ground. This is the magic right here. This decomposition, hyperactive release of the energy in here, transformation into more soil, living critter biomass, and the pooping and the peeing and the dead bodies, all that stuff. There's the magic right there. And here's some of the magic workers, our fungi. We can decay wood, we can decay leaves, we can have free floating living right on the soil surface that are opportunistic, and they get carbon from a bunch of different other places. These are wild growing shiitakes that have quote unquote escaped from my shiitake place in a bed of chipped leaves and branches after I've driven by with a flail chopper to chip it all up. The plant litter production above and below the soil surface directly controls the amount and the timing of nutrients returned to the forest floor. That is what controls the cycling of nutrients within the forested ecosystems, is that litter production above and below the soil surface. So timing of when we have litter available for decomposition is something that we have to learn to work with, whether we're chipping it and getting it to decompose prior to the growth season for stem elongation, or if we're chipping stuff just before the fruit or the nuts are being set finally to have an extra shot of nutrition available then. This is just some graphs showing a different relationship between the nutrient use and the amount of nutrients returned by litter fall. And here's some of our magic workhorses, our fungi. This is, we talked about this last week. This is oyster mushrooms on a hybrid poplar stump. After I harvested the hybrid poplar log that came off of this, it was approximately 1,000-pound worth of lumber that came off of that. Then the small diameter tops were inoculated with oyster mushroom to be grown in the woods. Then the stump was inoculated with oyster mushroom to start the decomposition cycle going on here. And if we had 1,000 pounds of above ground biomass, there's approximately 1,000 pounds, if not more, below ground biomass. So there's 1,000 pounds of complex carbon compounds that are the energy underneath the soil, right where we need it, slow release energy, biological sponge to store water and extra nutrients, etc. And then here's our other guys doing some of the work for us, as our critters going through. They're browsing branches and leaves, they're eating grasses. The grasses are their roots are in competition with our tree roots for nutrients and moisture, so they're helping to reduce competition for nutrients and moisture, and they're also adding their own nutrients to the system themselves. And here's the other technique that I use is I'll go by, I don't do any elaborate pruning like in many fruit orchards. I'll just go by and I'll cut with a chainsaw or loppers or a handheld Felco pruning saw, and I'll just trim the branches off so I can drive right next to it. Look how close to the trees I got, almost bumping into the trunks of the trees with the mulcher there. It's a flail chopper. That's a Berti, B-E-R-T-I orchard mower, and it'll chew up stems 2 inches in diameter easily. If I'm careful and put the branches across the path this way, I can chew up 4-inch diameter stems, but usually if it's 4-inch diameter stem, I'm going to be inoculating with mushrooms or using it for firewood. And then before I chip branches, like this picture up above, I'd scattered some Stropharia mushroom. I used the sawdust spawn, and that's what it looks like after you chip it, and it kind of covers all of your mushroom spawn with this nice layer of easily decomposed shredded leaves and wood. And then, you know, with a case of Stropharia, sometimes less than 6 months later, you'll get a flush of mushrooms, and they naturalize quite readily, and you'll find them all over the place. They're a little bit odd when you cook them because they're really inky gills, and when you cook them, whatever you're cooking, the gravy is going to turn really dark black, and so you may not want to use it with something light like a halibut or a pork, unless you just use it as a pour-on. So okay, so our fungal RDK cycle, we're going to be managing when we do chop and drop stuff. We're part of why we're doing that is we want to make sure that we have enough light going on to have green all the way down to the forest floor, because once these trees start to grow too close together, they'll begin to shade out the grass underneath. That's an indicator to us that we could be getting more photosynthesis happening, and what will happen is the individual trees will start to they will store less carbohydrate in their bodies. They'll produce less wood. They'll be narrower diameter. They can now become susceptible to pests and diseases. So although we may plant our systems quite high density, we will thin out over time. And right here, this is just past when I would have wanted to thin this particular spot right here. This is at a project in Virginia, USA, where they're subsequently doing quite a bit of thinning on that. This is more like what I'm looking for, and this actually, I did a lot of videos on this last summer. This was a high-density chestnut planting that we allowed to get invaded and overgrown by other species. You can see some staghorn sumac down here. There's staghorn sumac, white ash, black locust. There's hybrid poplar along behind. You can't really see the hybrid poplar behind there anymore. And what we did first was remove the undesirable material for firewood and for further inoculating with mushrooms. Lay the branches all down. We went through with the mower, chipped it all up, and then grazed the animal through here a couple different times. We've got good light penetration, a lot of photosynthesis going on. This will keep our trees in their fastest growing phase. The larger surface area of green that each individual tree has, the more surplus energy it can have, and that surplus energy can be stored as wood, storage to survive the winter and go next year, and or yield in the crop, and that's the partitioning of its nutrient. Where does it send its surplus to? And in my breeding program, and I encourage you guys to do the same, we want to select for plants that put a extra high proportion of their net annual gain, their surplus, into yield, into crop, because that's what we're doing. Is we're going to be growing this for food. That's part of the whole point. This is a food production system, and it's a wood production system. So the deeper and more convoluted our canopy architecture, the greater photosynthetic surface area we have. Just take a look at anything in nature where there is a medium exchanged between two different systems, like the villi inside your intestines is these deep triangles. So we have all of this exposure to the your chyme, your chewed up digestive juiced guck going through your intestines, so your body can absorb as much. Like this picture on the right, the inside of your lungs. We try to maximize, nature maximizes the surface area in order to have an exchange. And so if we're going to be exchanging carbon dioxide, which is going to be the basic energy for our whole system, nitrogen, obviously, because we're going to have, 80 some odd % of the atmosphere is nitrogen, so that's important. Sunlight, we want to have more sunlight available to our plants so we can have more total photosynthetic gain. So we want to have a nice deep canopy architecture, and that's accomplished two ways. In the early years, by planting high density, and then later on by removing material to keep the size of the canopies as large as possible on our most productive plants, and so that we have grass growing all the way down. We have green photosynthetic layer all the way down to the ground. So this could theoretically be 100 feet deep of green, big gigantic green solar panels. And of course, when we have this semi-shaded system as well, it starts to it manages the temperature, and so we can keep our system in the optimum photosynthetic range. If it's too sunny and too wide open, it'll get too hot, and photosynthesis will decline. When it gets really, really hot, the plants shut down completely, and they keep metabolizing. They'll actually lose. It's like losing weight. They kind of use more carbon than they actually take out of the atmosphere. So then they're a net loss to the whole system. We want to have a good canopy architecture, partially shaded, in order to keep us in this zone right here. One of the things that this shows right here, this is the carbon budget. This is part of the allocation of carbon inside the plant. And if you just look right here, look what it's sending in this particular tree. 55.5% of the total energy that it makes, all the sugars, are going right towards the production of roots. And a little bit of the construction, maintenance, respiration, but so 55, 61, almost 62% of every single bit of energy that this tree has sequestered, captured from the sun, is now going towards root growth. Root growth is actually critical, especially in the early years of our plants. We want those roots to be deep and strong, rugged and sturdy, because later on in their life we may go through drought cycles, and we want to have good, strong roots to be able to survive water shortage, because they're so extensive they'll reach out further. We want to have a good active root system, because the fine roots growing and sloughing off, that's part of our production of carbon that decomposes in our soil. That's part of the soil enrichment process, or all these fine roots. And what's interesting about, I think I went backwards, I wasn't supposed to. We talked about this before as well, but this is directly applicable to kind of this case study, the stuff that we're going to be talking about later on here, is that in the early years, when we plant our trees, we want to put them into poor soil. Now, I know that the books say you want to dig a $40 hole for a $10 tree, because you want that tree to get the best start and all that kind of whatever. What we want to do, though, is not give it everything it wants, because when you give that plant all the nutrients that it wants in the early years, it doesn't allocate many resources to root development. It puts it all towards top growth, and it becomes like a top-heavy and a weak root system. If we put it into poor soil, low nitrogen soil, it'll put up to 36% of its energy goes towards fine root development. And fine root development, remember, those are the sloughing of the roots, pulsing the carbon into the soil. Whereas if it was rich soil, it's only putting like 8% of its total energy available going towards root development. So if you baby your trees in the early years, they'll put it all into leaf growth, which is really not what we're looking for in stem. Do you really want more stem and leaf on your fruit tree or nut tree within 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line? If it's stressed for some reason, it just doesn't have the roots to support it when you need it. So the roots are extra important, of course, in a system where we're going to be generating all the fertility internally within the system. And to answer one of the questions that was put out there on this is not a replay of last week. What it is I'm replaying some of the high points from a previous few webinars to say, look, these are the principles that we're working with. Well, now how do we turn it into real action on the ground, which is what we're getting to. But we have to understand, in order to manage a system more ecologically, we have to understand how natural systems work, and then we figure out how to plug into the way systems work in order to manage it through time. So following a disturbance, up here in the case here of a clear cut, and down here in the case of agriculture, the living plant biomass will begin to increase from near zero until it finally reaches a certain mature state. And if you've ever had a garden or a farm field like this, and just a few months into this particular here, where the guy is on his red tractor, let's say he plants maize, 2 months, 2 weeks, 3 months, whatever later, you're going to start having weeds come into the system. Well, those weeds are natural succession, plant succession occurring, that are taking this system here back to what it would become, and that what it would become is determined by the weather, water, temperature, available fertility. If you're in Alaska, it's going to be one particular plant community type. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, it's going to be another plant community type. If you're in a very arid area, Arizona, New Mexico, it's going to be another plant community type. If you're in northeastern Maine, it'll be another one. This one right here on the right is in Croatia, I believe it is, and this clear cut up on the upper left, that could be anywhere. So what happens is that biomass used to be like this on the right, was removed. Either all the top material was hauled away, turned into toilet paper or building material, or even the stumps and the roots were all bulldozed and burned, and then annual crops planted, and